Hey, everybody. My name is Amy. I am the founder of Glue Veterinary Coaching.
And I'm Kat. I am the veterinary practice specialist with Glue.
So here we are, Kat. We're on a podcast.
Ah,
Do you know how to make a podcast?
nope.
I do not either. We're about to find out. So if you are listening to this, we figured out how to make a podcast.
We can just applause.
Applaud ourselves
We
for
did it.
overcoming that challenge. So today we would like to talk about the concept of, as leaders, being friend zoned. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
that something that you have ever felt like, am I being too nice? Do people see me as their buddy versus their leader? Right.
Totally. Yeah, I think I've definitely been friend zoned more in the workplace than I have in my personal life. But I would say
That's okay.
for
You're an
sure.
introvert. You're an introvert. It doesn't
That's
matter.
right. I don't put myself out there that much. Yeah, friend zone. I think that that's a really, really important thing to talk about and something that I think as leaders we put ourselves in a lot because of lots of things that we'll get into today. I think there's a lot of reasons why we choose to lean that way. Or there's also the opposite side where you're the unapproachable manager. So there's
Right.
these two extremes that I think that a lot of leaders in vet med find ourselves in and don't even realize that we're there
Well,
and that
and we
we're
see it a
needing to
lot
fit in.
when we work with practices and with leaders. We see that someone is either the hard ass, right? Or
Hmm.
super huggy,
Yeah.
the mama bear of the practice. And
Yep.
so neither one of those is going to work very well. And so the key then is figuring out, how do you find that middle spot, sort of on that continuum of that middle spot where people see you as approachable and trustworthy and they feel connected to you, but also see you and experience you as a leader, as someone to follow. And it's
Mm-hmm.
finding that little balance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think the mutual respect, right? The reciprocity in the behavior exchange is really
Right.
important.
So what
And
are some ways that you could look at yourself as a leader and recognize if you've been friend zoned? Like, what are some of the characteristics of that? So Kat, you go. We don't know what we're going to say here, by the way. We're just
yeah,
talking.
right
So
off the drum. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, so many things. I think one of the first things that comes to mind is excessive outside texting.
ah,
How
right,
about
right.
that? I mean, I can say, especially when I was a young leader, when I was, back in like 2011, 2012, when I was just getting pushed in from being a technician to a leader when I had no idea what I was doing. Okay.
Right, which is like the majority, right? The
Um,
majority that end up in leadership but have not been taught anything about leadership.
Yeah. And I will say that was an especially hard for place for me to be. And I think that this is probably a place where a lot of people are, where we go from the technician, where we are friends with a lot of people,
Hmm.
and then we have to move into a leadership role where we have to start coaching some of our friends.
Yeah,
And
offering feedback, and can be very, very challenging.
yeah, yeah. And I will say that that was probably one of the biggest areas is like understanding my outside relationships with people
Hmm.
and how to balance that because we do want them, right? Like we do want some kind of outside relationship. How we build connections with people isn't just through talking about heartworm disease.
Right, right.
Like we want to talk about the babies and the grandmamas and we want to hold space for personal lives. Um,
But
but
that boundary can get easily overstepped when we allow it. And I think we see that a lot. We see
totally.
managers that are, or leaders, in any role in the practice, who are wanting to create those connections. And those connections are so critically important in leadership. When you build connections, you earn trust. And when you earn trust, that's where you have influence as a leader. So you
Yep.
need those connections, but how do we keep those connections within some boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So that's another red flag when the connections that you have with people lead them into spilling way more than maybe they I don't want to say should be, but they feel very comfortable to say all the things in all the ways that they would say it to their best friend, which sounds
Hmm.
different, right? If I'm talking to you as my manager, I would hopefully have a little bit more polish on that than talking to you as my friend, and just letting it
Yeah.
all out there. So I think that could be another flag.
Yeah, totally. And also what I'll say leads in to what this opens more up for is for more outside conversation about work and not work environment. And so a lot of times those boundaries will then start being crossed of like, hey, I'm just gonna text you and tell you that I'm not coming in today. When
Oh,
we
yeah, yeah,
know that
yeah.
our policy is we're gonna call the people that are actually at the hospital to let them know
Yeah.
that something is changing in the schedule, not texting your manager at 11:30 at night whenever they're not even working the next day or
Right, right.
whatever that looks like.
Right, right, right. Well, and I think that brings up another good point of ways that we see this is when that sense of expectations or accountability feels different between
Mm, mm,
different
yes.
employees that you lead,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Moving
Like
right along.
the rules don't exactly apply to me in the same way that it applies to Jane,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Which brings up a red flag number two. If you are
I think
getting
this is number
feedback,
4 at this point.
love it.
What is it?
Whoever's counting, let us
Yeah.
know. Um, if you get feedback as a manager that you have a
Ah,
teacher's pet or everyone's not being treated fairly or
favorites.
some people
Favorites.
favorites.
There's
Yep,
favorites here.
exactly. Yep.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's a really good one. I wonder
Yeah.
what number. That's either 3 or 4. So those are just some ideas, right? Of what are
Yeah.
some of the ways, and we could come up with a giant list, right? We could keep going, but I think those are probably covered the key ones that are things to look out for as red flags. So then the next question is, and this is probably more a self-reflection question for people that are listening, but we can also reflect for ourselves as leaders, like you and me,
Hmm. Yeah.
is how did you get to that place? Like,
Yeah.
what was the motivation that led that sort of continuum to lean further to the huggy end of the
Hmm.
spectrum?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is maybe more important than the identifying of how we're friend zoned because this is really what motivates us to become friend zoned,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so, things like I'll use myself as an example. I wanted to be accepted by my friends. I wanted
Right.
my friends to see me as the leader and respect me as that. And I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea how to
Yeah.
build that, right?
Yeah.
And so I deeply wanted to be accepted. And let's just be honest, that goes far deeper than my workplace, which it does for most of us, right? And that's why glue is so good for all
Yeah.
the things.
Right. Right.
Um,
But not for this podcast, Kat.
right, right, right,
Keep your
right.
personal issues to yourself.
You know I have a hard time doing that, Amy. But truly, what motivates us, I think is the biggest question. What are you telling yourself?
Hmm.
Oh, I really need my schedule filled this weekend. I don't want anyone to call out this weekend. And
Hmm.
so I have to make sure that I stay really, really friendly
Hmm.
and make sure that this place feels like glitter and rainbows so no one calls out or drops like flies on me this
Yeah,
weekend.
yeah. Well, and I think also it's a fear response, especially if you don't
Big time.
feel as though you have been fully developed as a leader, right? So like you maybe haven't had a ton of opportunities to develop skills, because leadership really is an art form and it's
Mm,
absolutely learnable, 100%. It's part of
yep.
what we do, right? Is sharing those sort of lessons and concepts and mindsets with leaders. But when you don't feel confident in your ability to make the right choices or say the right things, then a lot of times we then kind of lean on connection more because we're scared of causing a rift, causing conflict, making someone not like us, right?
Mhm.
Like they come into your office and have a conversation, and like the fear is they're going to go back out and talk smack about you with the rest of the team. And so
Mhm.
we're too gentle, or we hold our expectations or our bar too low, to create the type of culture that you want and type of team that you want. Um, because we're fearful of what would happen if we really started holding people more accountable. Does that make
Yeah. Oh my
sense?
gosh. Yes, yes, yes. And I think that
Hmm.
that is underlying in a lot of the other situations, right? So like
Yeah.
for me, definite deep fear. I didn't have an appropriate model to replicate, right? And
Hmm.
so, being a manager is a lot of times very much so a very lonely place to be, and like in my situation I wasn't modeled. There was no
Yeah.
correct model, and also my doctors were there to be doctors.
Yeah.
They weren't there, they didn't want to help manage, and they were also dealing with all of their own stress, and so it was kind of felt like I was alone and
Mm.
I needed these allies.
Yeah.
um And
Allies. I
also,
think that's a great point. Like we even talk about in Glue about creating allies among the team, especially when we're trying to do big cultural shifts.
mhm,
But when we're too focused on creating allies, then what we have is a bunch of people that are all likable and like you. But when the time comes to do something hard, they're like, this only goes so far. My
mhm,
alliance here only goes so far.
mhm.
Right.
They actually end up liking you because you're the one that they know that they don't have to be held accountable with, but that
Yeah,
you
that's
can still sit in their circle.
And that's a good one. That's it. When I
Mhm.
even learned, you're talking about your own leadership experience. When I, as glue, my second part of my life, with working with glue, I had to have tough conversations with practice owners, right? And I was definitely much more tiptoey, coddling, stroking like, you know what I mean, right?
Mhm.
It's not an HR version of stroking. But really trying to, hold them up so much. Um, and so that then they would like the things that I had to say. So that then
Yep.
when I had to say something hard, maybe they wouldn't freak out as much. So
Yeah.
I went through the same thing. And I mean, I can remember very specific people. I will not name names because they are still practicing, but where like what they needed from me was
Yep.
something much more structured and honest and challenging. But I wasn't ready yet to step into that role. I am now. I have no issues with that now because I know, and I hope you all know that are listening as leaders, I know that when that's something someone needs, it's my job to give them that. Like that is my whole role because we're
Yep.
helping people be better. That's what we do as leaders is
Yeah.
help people be better. So some of that definitely comes with experience, but it also is skills that can be learned. And I think
Yep.
that when you're more confident in your leadership skills in general, it's much easier to create those boundaries, right? Because you don't feel like you have to lean on that connection as much as a crutch, as instead of as sort of a resource or a valuable component of the relationship.
Yep. And if we think about like how we've all been in these situations where people have shown up one way and then all of a sudden shown up a very different way, and it's jarring to us.
You're talking
One
about
of
like if you change positions, like
Well,
if you,
like if we come in all huggy and then all of a sudden we're
oh,
like, oh
gotcha.
no, we have something that we need to say, but we haven't led with that balance,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then one of our gluisms is the definition of conflict is misaligned expectations. And
Hmm.
if I am expecting my manager to come in and be this non-confrontational, huggy, let me cross the boundaries, isn't going to tell me that I need to finish my notes, isn't going to tell me when I'm consistently 10 minutes late for work every day, and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
there are these boundaries that are being set,
yeah,
that's going to feel really weird. And
yeah.
so that's going to cause more for you to clean up later,
Right.
instead of if we can kind of notice it and then we can kind of slowly shift it
Hmm.
into something that's more normalized. That is
Yeah.
where your best bet is, right?
Well, and we probably should explain this. Kat specifically, and the reason why her title is practice specialist is she does a lot of deep dives, what we kind of think of as deep dives, where she spends, or you, I should talk to you, I'm talking to you right now, where you spend a ton of time, instead of in the third person, you spend a ton of time where you actually sort of almost become a live-in, not like literally in the hospital, but spend extensive amount of time with practices. And this is very often an area that you are coaching leaders to start shifting that balance back to a more healthy place. And
Oh
it
yeah.
could be from either direction. It could be either from they are a hard ass that everybody hates them and
Hmm.
thinks they're out to get them, or you hug them every time you walk by and say, how are you? Right. And they're so either direction, it's very common where you're having to coach people into that more balanced approach, which is going to be more effective for everyone.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And if we want to talk about the amount of energy that it takes to keep yourself in that, constant giving place and constant, like,
Yeah.
what I think of when you say like going around and like hugging every single person and like putting their hands on their backs is like you opening space to hold all of the excuses as to why they can't do their job.
I like that. That's right. And
You
now it
know?
all is on your shoulders now.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just a place for you to walk around and transfer all of the weight rather
Yeah.
than showing someone else how to responsibly carry it together.
Yeah. So, how does someone, if you, listeners, if you recognize this in yourself as a veterinary leader, how does one go about starting to slowly make that shift without it being so jarring, without it feeling and even feeling inauthentic, right? If
Yep.
you've been acting one way forever and then you're trying to start shifting, we need to do it in a way that can feel authentic and real. Otherwise, everyone's going to just call you out on it anyways. And they're going to
Yeah.
say, that's not real. That's not sticking around. So, what
Yeah.
are your suggestions, Kat? How do you begin?
Well, I would say probably the number one thing that I see is that leaders have been in this space for so long that they end up getting burnt out and then getting really frustrated and shifting onto the other side before we have taken the time to really digest it for ourselves and do the things that we just walk through, which is like, am I being friend zoned? And if so, how did I get here? And really
Mhm.
listening to your internal drive
Yeah,
that has pushed you into that side of the pendulum of friend zone or unapproachable.
right.
And instead of just taking that and being like, excuse me, instead of taking that and being like, oh my gosh, I've been so taken advantage of that now I'm going to like get on my high horse and I'm going to do everything in a 180.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's do this in a really slow way. How do we
yeah,
do this in a really slow way? We start by paying attention to what's driving our behavior. We start with EQ 101,
right.
self-awareness, understanding, Glue has
EQ,
a
EQ being emotional aware intelligence, in case
yes.
somebody doesn't know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thanks.
Hmm.
And Glue has an amazing program where we really break down what is going on in your limbic system, what's going on in that emotional state of your brain that is driving you to hide and take cover or to lash out when things get
Right.
too big and set these big boundaries or demands or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Well, and I think that self-reflection is super important but I don't like that part. So I'm going to talk about the actual actions you take, right?
Yeah,
So
girl.
I think that when we are in this situation where we're not on the end of the continuum, we want it to be the first thing in my mind. And you can totally disagree. This is all subjective, right? But the first thing
Totally.
in my mind that's most important is redefining expectations, right? It's saying, okay,
Yes.
what are the expectations that we all should be held to in order to create the culture that we want. And
Mm,
so that creation of expectations does not come just from the leader, right? It doesn't, if you do that, it's not going to work, right?
right.
This usually will look, and we do this all the time, this usually will look like a conversation, a team meeting that says, what is most important to us? What are the things, how do we want to treat each other? How do we want to talk to each other? What can we trust from each other? What are the expectations we have for each other? And then as a leader, you are able to go back in and say, these are the words that you shared of how you want us to interact together. And my job as a leader is to hold those boundaries.
Mm,
And
mm,
so
mm.
now it's saying, this is what you want. I'm going to help you get there. Right. And so, we can do it in all of our fancy glue ways, or you can do it in the way it's just a conversation. Right. And it can be a vulnerable conversation, but let them define what they want. And then, of course, you've got some input in that. Right. And then we hold them to those expectations so that accountability is coming still from that place of connection. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're a huggy person, it's coming from that place of connection. Um, and it's about you fighting, advocating for the type of culture your team wants instead
Mm.
of suddenly you changing the way that you interact with them and doing 1,000 write-ups and people are spinning like, what is going on around here?
Right. I love
Right.
that because it's really about there's this piece of like taking our power back, and that's it's kind of like one of the bottom drivers for all of this. It's like we're really huggy because we want the power to influence people, right? We want
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're using to show ourselves that we have some influence in the situation,
Mm-hmm.
or we become really unapproachable because that is how we feel like we need to control the situation. And
Or
really it's all
leading through fear, not leading, managing using fear. Yeah.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
Good differentiator. And I love that you brought up the piece of vulnerability because really all of this is coming from a deeply vulnerable place.
It's very
Our
uncomfortable.
need to people please or our need to dominate. Those
Right.
are both very vulnerable places. And I love this realization that number one, what you did there is you showed how to take your power back and also to give it to your team too, instead of this
Hmm.
being like, I've got the power and I'm going to either try to manipulate it through all of this like love bombing,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
or
Right.
I'm going to try to manipulate it through my sheer power and write-ups and fear.
Right.
They're both incredibly vulnerable places to be.
Yeah,
And so
for
the
sure.
ability of giving that power back to your team and being like, hey, isn't this what you want? Don't you want a better work environment? And
Yep.
then that place to drop in with your team. That's vulnerable and that's connection, whether you do it Glue's way or your own
Yep.
way. That's it.
Just do it. Just get there.
Boom.
Right.
Right.
I think we
But
covered
it does,
this. Did
yeah.
we cover? Oh, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, but it does have to be vulnerable in some way,
Yeah.
but realize that you're already incredibly naked. You're already incredibly vulnerable,
That's
and
an
you're just
HR.
choosing,
HR.
shoot.
You're just not supposed to be naked.
Oh God, we're so bad at
No,
this.
no nakedness, no
Well, this
stroking.
is why we don't specialize in HR. Okay. But yeah, it is. It's vulnerable no matter what way you look at it. So if you can do it in this way of like
Yeah.
empowering your team, isn't this what you want? And
Yep.
how do we do this together?
Yeah.
And you're actually in it with them,
Huge.
or
That's
as the kids
how,
would say,
what are you doing the snaps?
and
Yeah.
doing the little T thing.
I don't know what that is. But
Wow.
the thing is that I think that it's almost like triangulating, right? That now you're willing to fight for them and what they want. And that feels so incredibly different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh, yeah. Directly
Love
to
it.
the source.
Okay. I think we just completed our first podcast episode. I think we did
Well,
it. Well, we'll
if
find.
people hear it, then we did
I
it.
mean, yeah, if you hear this, it means that we figured out how to actually do something with this.
Oh my gosh, I
Well,
love
thanks
it.
for joining us, everybody. If you have any ideas or disagree or agree, anything you want to share, please check us out on social media. Tell us what you thought about this episode. And this is pretty much the approach we're going to take. We're going to be looking at questions, the big questions that we get asked regularly, the big challenges you face as leaders, and then addressing them on the fly. And whatever comes out of our mouths comes out of our mouths.
That's right.
All right.
Strokes and nakedness at all.
We'll see you
Oh
guys
my
next
gosh.